In this video, we're going to show you how to install the power steering rack on your Toyota Tundra located underneath the front side of your vehicle. We're going to start by centering and securing our steering wheel in the straight forward position. We're going to use our securing strap. And we're going to put our strap onto our brake pedal arm here. And this is going to keep our steering wheel from spinning around when we disconnect it from the steering rack. Using a 21mm socket, let's loosen and remove our lug nuts. Now that you have your lug nuts removed, grab that wheel, remove it, and set it aside. With both of the front wheels off the vehicle, I want to go ahead and disconnect our outer tie rod here. There's a cotter pin on the back side we now need to remove. I'm going to start by using a pair of cutters here. You can use pliers as well. I'm going to bend the tab over and then remove the cotter pin. Now, cotter pins are a one-time use, so you want to be able to go ahead and source some replacements. Now, on our particular vehicle, this is a 21mm nut, so we're going to go ahead and loosen that. Now, I'm not going to remove the nut yet. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to strike the side of the knuckle right here, and that should allow this outer tie rod to release from the knuckle. Next step is go ahead and remove the nut on our tie rod end. Pull this out. Now, with the tie rod disconnected, we can go ahead and just swing the wheel assembly over, or the brake assembly. Now, we're going to go ahead and remove our tie rod end here, and we're going to count the amount of revolutions that it takes to remove it and separate it from the inner tie rod. 12 rotations. So I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to use a crayon, and I'm going to put 12 up inside on the frame here. That reminds me that is going to be 12 turns. Now, we're going to repeat the same exact process for the passenger side. Now, on the driver's side part of the steering rack, we have our intermediate shaft coming down, and it connects to our steering rack right here. Now, this is a pinch bolt design or a clamp. It's a 12mm bolt. We did spray that down with some rust penetrant. I want to go ahead, loosen, and remove this bolt. Now we're just spinning the bolt out. And remove that bolt. Now you're going to notice on the bolt head side of the clamp, there's going to be a little split right here. And what we can do is either put a wedge tool. It could either be a flathead screwdriver or a small pry bar. We want to tap this in and open up the clamp and slide this off of our steering rack. Now we're going to put our screwdriver into the split on the clamp here, and we're going to tap this. What we're doing is we're trying to open up this clamp and tap the clamp up off of the splined shaft on the steering rack itself. Now, in the center of our steering rack, we have our vertical bolt right here. On the top side is a 19mm. We're going to use a swivel head ratchet in our 19mm shallow socket to go ahead and gain access to this. Now, it does not have a lot of room. Now, we did soak that down in some rust penetrant. All right, loosen and remove that bolt. On the passenger side here, we have a C-clamp here that holds the steering rack to the frame. Use a 19mm socket. Now, on the top here, there are two lines that run across the top of the steering rack. And normally there's a bracket there to hold it. It's probably going to be a 10mm bolt with a bracket holding the two lines. Ours is missing, and it's held in place with a tie strap. So we're simply going to use our cutters and remove that tie strap. You want to go ahead and separate that clamp. Okay, so we have our high pressure line and our return line now separated from the rack itself. On the lower side here, on the driver's side, we have the single horizontal bolt running through. It's a 22mm nut here, and then we have a bolt head on the other side. I'm going to try and loosen this. All right, we have the bolt and we have the washer off now. Now, ideally what we want to do is we can pull this bolt out. The steering rack will stay stable for the most part because we have the center support right here kind of holding it in place. But now we want to go ahead and loosen these two lines. We have the high pressure line and the return line here. We want to kind of loosen and separate the lower line first. That's going to allow us for room to get our wrench in the upper line, separate and loosen that. You are going to lose power steering fluid from both the rack and the line, so make sure you have your catch can underneath. We have a 17mm on the top and we have a 16mm on the bottom. You are going to lose fluid from this when we separate the lines, so have a catch can underneath prepared to catch that fluid. Now with that lower line out, we're going to use our 17mm. I want to go ahead and loosen the upper line here. Now with the lines disconnected, we're going to go ahead and remove the horizontal bolt here. Now, if the bolt is stuck a little bit like ours is, you can use a brass punch. Go ahead and work that bolt out. Now we went ahead and sprayed down our pinch bolt with some rust penetrant a little more. I'm going to try and work this up and off. So we're going to use our pry bar, start to work our rack a little bit. Now on our particular vehicle on the lower passenger side here, on your sway bar there would normally be a clamp here with a bushing holding our sway bar. Now that would hold that sway bar over. On our particular vehicle, it is rusted and broken off. We're going to have to replace that at a later time. You should be able to remove the bracket here and remove the steering rack bushing. Now we have both of our steering racks laid out here, old one and our new one. Now the thing is, you have a couple different ways to set our steering rack so that it lines up with the centered steering shaft or steering wheel inside the vehicle. So you have your input shaft right here. This has a plastic or rubber cap on it, and underneath this is the spline shaft. Now what we're going to do is we want to go ahead and get a preliminary setting on this here. Now you can do two different things. One is you can use your pliers and crank this so that the steering rack goes all the way out one side. Crank it all the way back the other way, take the amount of turns, and you want to split that in half. That way there, you can go ahead and turn that shaft halfway back. That will center your rack. The other way you can get a base setting is simply make sure that that is level. And you can do a basic setting here. I'm going to go from the outside, and I'm going to come to, say, the edge of this housing right here, because this housing has to be identical to this for it to fit into the vehicle. So we are at 14.5 inches from the outside here to this outer edge of this aluminum casting. And we're at 14.75 here. So we're about 1/4 of an inch difference here. Now you can also do the same thing on the other side of the rack as well to get a base setting there. So I'm going to use my pliers, and I'm going to keep the sheathing on this here because I don't want to damage the splines. And I want to turn this so it is 14.75. Now remember, this is a crude adjustment. You are definitely going to have an alignment performed. All right, we're at 14.75 right there. 14.75. And if you want to, go to the other side as well. You can come to the other side and you can do a similar measurement. You can come from the outer portion of the inner tie rod here and say we're going to come to the housing here for this line. That is roughly 14.5/8 and roughly 14.5/8. So we're pretty dang close with this rack matching up to the old one. I'm going to go ahead and remove the cap here. I'm going to slide this off. We also have to swap over the rubber cap from the old rack. Just a rubber boot. I'm going to clean that up. You can wipe it up or you can use a spray solvent on there, but for the most part, you should be able to just clean that up by hand. These here are just plugs, so when we go to install our lines, we're going to pop those plugs out. Let's go ahead and raise this up into the vehicle. Before we pop our rack up into place, let's go ahead and clean our fittings, clean the lines. We want to make sure that these threaded nutserts here, or threaded inserts, are clean and spinning easily. Clean the threads. On the passenger side, I'm going to go ahead and clean the stud here. And if you want, you can run a wire brush or something on the threads here to make sure that these are clean and ready. Clean the surface. On the clamp here for intermediate shaft, I'm going to go ahead and spray that down with some solvent. We're going to clean this up. We want to make sure that we put a small dab of grease on the splines on the inside. We're going to feed our rack up into place here. And I want to slide the input shaft in there. Okay, we have our intermediate shaft splines on the rack. We have our rack pretty much set up into place here. It's being supported by the center bracket. Install the rack bushing. Now our bracket itself has a larger sleeve on one end than the other. The longer sleeve is going to go on the bottom. And slide that into place. I'm going to go ahead and get the nut started right here. Install the upper bolt. We just want to get these caught just a couple threads. Install our horizontal bolt. Then the rack needs to get slid over just a little bit. Just use your pry bar in different locations here to get that to line up. Install the washer and the nut. Now the next thing we want to do is just do a visual inspection up inside the bolt hole here and make sure that that pilot hole is pretty much lined up for the most part. Then we're going to go ahead and snug this down, and we'll snug down the clamp, and then we'll go ahead and lower down the bolt up top to come down. We're going to feed our bolt up through the top here. I'm going to go ahead and thread that bolt down as far as I can. Now with our rack installed here, we can go ahead and do a basic measurement here. We're about just under 14 3/4, which we're pretty dang close to where we actually set this to before we're installing it. So it might have bumped just a tiny bit. We can go ahead and finalize our adjustment here with the adjustment of our outer tie rods, as well as after that, you're going to bring the vehicle down, get an alignment performed anyways. So we just want a base preliminary setting at this point. Install your intermediate shaft bolt into the clamp. Now that we have our bolt in, we can go ahead and torque this down to 26 foot-pounds. On the passenger side of our steering rack, we have our clamp. I want to go ahead and torque down this nut to 123 foot-pounds. And do the same for the bolt up top. Now you want to go ahead and torque down the center bolt to 123 foot-pounds as well, if you can. If not, tighten it down pretty tight. Torque down our horizontal bolt to 96 foot-pounds. Pull out the rubber plug. On the new line, install the O-ring over the end of the tube. Roll that down. I'm going to put a little bit of power steering fluid on that seal. Raise that up. Line it up into the rack. And I'm going to start the fitting by hand. You want to make sure you can get that threaded in several threads before putting any tools on there. All right, we have that threaded in pretty far by hand, so we know that the threads are caught properly. Line up the hose. Now you're just going to have to flex the unit around a little bit to go ahead and get that nut started. We did go ahead and put some power steering fluid on that O-ring. You just need to work this around gently to go ahead and get that nut started. You want to make sure you get it in several threads and make sure that this is not cross-threading. Now when these bottom out, you just want to make them good and snug. You don't want to over tighten them as you can crack the rack itself. So once it bottoms out, just give it a little bit more. You want to check that on both of them. Now at this point here, on the top of your passenger side of the steering rack, there's probably going to be a mounting bracket right above this line here. You want to go ahead and install that bracket, and that should support both of these lines in place. Ours was missing, so we're going to go ahead and find an alternate way to secure that, but go ahead and install your bracket. We're going to install our tie rod end here. That took us 12 turns to remove it. Swing this over, rotate our knuckle, install the ball joint, install our castle nut. Go ahead and torque this down to 103 foot-pounds. Going to use our pliers to tighten this down. You want to make sure these are good and tight. Now we do want to go ahead and make sure that our tie rod end here is level with the knuckle itself. So simply just going to grab this and just twist that gently and level that out. Now we have our castle nut torqued down. You want to make sure that one of the notches in the castle nut lines up with the hole in the ball joint for our cotter pin, and ours is just a little bit off. Now you never want to loosen this nut for one to line up. Go ahead and tighten that down to the next notch. With that lined up, go ahead and install a new cotter pin. Take one of those tabs. We're going to bend it up and over. And cut off the excess. Once you have this all assembled, go ahead and repeat this process for the passenger side. Take your wheel, line it up. Let's go ahead and install our lug nuts. Once we get all these started, we're going to go ahead and snug them down. Torque down your lug nuts to 83 foot-pounds. We're going to do this in a crisscross pattern. You can now go ahead and remove the securing strap from the steering wheel. Go ahead and open up the reservoir cap. Using the appropriate fluid for this model vehicle, I want to go ahead and add this fluid to the reservoir. Now the hole is really small on the top unless you have a very small funnel. And our setup is cold, so what we're going to do is on the side of the reservoir here, there is a cold mark, high and low, and then just to the left of it, that's a hot, high and low. So after you've driven the vehicle, you want to check that fluid level at that point. It should be in the hot area. We're going to fill this to the cold on the high side. And what we're going to do is we're going to go in and cycle the steering wheel left and right, and that will start to purge out any of the air bubbles in the system if we have any in there. And then we're just going to come back and check this here and fill it up accordingly. Once you're all set with this, you want to go ahead and take the vehicle for road test, come back and recheck it, and top off as needed.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.